"Ma'am, you're not understanding her at all." The boardroom went silent. Every executive in that mahogany-lined room turned to stare at the young black woman holding a coffee tray. She had just interrupted the most powerful business meeting in the city. The Chinese billionaire CEO worth $12 billion had been speaking for 20 minutes. Nobody understood a word. But this waitress did. What happened next would expose the shocking truth about power, assumptions, and the hidden brilliance that walks among us every single day. Because sometimes the person serving your coffee knows more about your world than you could ever imagine. This is that story. The mahogany table stretched like a battlefield across the 42nd floor of Sterling Industries, its polished surface reflecting the crystal chandelier that hung like a crown above Manhattan's most ruthless board of directors. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. But the real power in this room had nothing to do with the view. Margaret Sterling sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne. 53 years old, silver hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore her authority like armor, Armani suit pressed to perfection, diamond earrings catching the light with each dismissive tilt of her head. Her fingers drummed impatiently against the Italian leather portfolio before her. Time was money. And patience? That was for the weak. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice cutting through the air like ice. "Let's get this over with." The executives flanking her nodded in synchronized agreement. Robert Hayes, chief financial officer, adjusted his gold cufflinks and smirked. David Morrison, head of operations, checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. These men had built careers on saying no, on finding reasons why revolutionary ideas wouldn't work, on protecting their comfortable corner of the corporate world. At the opposite end of the table sat Maya Chen, 38 years old, worth $12 billion, and right now she looked terrifyingly small in the vastness of their judgment. Her black hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders, and though her navy suit was impeccably tailored, she fidgeted with the presentation remote in her hands. The woman who commanded factories across 3 continents, who had revolutionized supply chains from Shanghai to Sao Paulo, was struggling with 8 English words. "My process, it changes everything," Maya said, her accent thick with nervousness. She gestured toward the projection screen showing complex diagrams that might as well have been hieroglyphics to the men watching her. Margaret's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Miss Chen, we appreciate your enthusiasm. But perhaps you could explain in terms we can understand?" The condescension hung in the air like smoke. In the corner of the room, almost invisible, Keisha Williams moved like a shadow. 29 years old, wearing the standard black uniform of the catering company, she refilled water glasses with practiced efficiency. Her dark skin seemed to absorb the light, making her nearly invisible to the powerful men who never looked twice at the help. She had perfected this invisibility over years of serving in rooms exactly like this one. But Keisha was listening to every word, to every dismissive laugh, to every frustrated pause as Maya searched for English words that wouldn't come. And unlike everyone else in that room, Keisha understood exactly what Maya Chen was trying to say. The presentation continued, Maya's voice growing smaller with each failed explanation, while the executive's patience wore thinner with each passing minute. None of them noticed the waitress who had stopped moving. None of them realized that everything was about to change. Friends, before we go further, may I ask a small favor? Please subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us keep bringing you these stories, and reaching 10 subscribers soon is so important for us to continue. We also love hearing from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see how our little storytelling circle is spreading across the world. And if you enjoyed the beginning, give this video a like. And let's share thoughts on the whole story together below. Maya's hands trembled as she clicked to the next slide. The projection screen filled with intricate flowcharts and manufacturing schematics that represented 5 years of her life's work. But the words, the English words she desperately needed, scattered like leaves in a storm the moment she opened her mouth. The efficiency rate, island. She paused, her brow furrowing as she searched for the phrase. In Mandarin, the concept flowed like poetry. In English, it crumbled like ancient paper. 93% reduction in waste. No, wait. She shook her head, frustration bleeding into her voice. 93% more. Better. Robert Hayes leaned back in his leather chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Better? He whispered to David Morrison, loud enough for the table to hear. Is that a technical term? Morrison chuckled, adjusting his tie with theatrical precision. Perhaps we need a translator for translator. Maya's cheeks flushed crimson. She understood their mockery perfectly. Her English comprehension far exceeded her ability to speak under pressure. Each snicker, each sideways glance, each barely concealed eye roll landed like a physical blow. This wasn't just about language. This was about respect, about being seen as an equal in a room that had already decided she didn't belong. My apologies, Maya said, her accent thickening as stress mounted. What I mean to say, island, the environmental impact. She gestured helplessly at the screen, showing carbon footprint reductions that could change entire industries. 70% less damage? Harm? The planet? It. Margaret Sterling's manicured fingers drummed against the table in a staccato rhythm of impatience. She glanced at her platinum Cartier watch, a gesture designed to wound. Miss Chen, we're very busy people. If you could just get to the point? The cruelty in her tone was surgical, precise. Maya's shoulders sagged as if the words had physical weight. This process. Maya tried again, her voice now barely above a whisper. It saves jobs. Thousands of jobs. In Detroit, in Cleveland, in... She searched desperately for the English phrase. The cities that are broken, dying, economically depressed. Hayes offered with mock helpfulness, earning another round of quiet laughter from his colleagues. But Maya wasn't talking about economics textbook terminology. She was talking about Maria, the single mother in her Ohio facility who worked double shifts to keep her children in school. About James, the former auto worker in Michigan who had found purpose again in her sustainable manufacturing program. About communities that had been written off by men exactly like the ones sitting across from her. The presentation screen flickered to a slide showing job creation statistics, environmental impact data, and profit projections that should have made every person in that room lean forward with interest. Instead, Margaret tapped her pen against her portfolio with the persistence of a countdown timer. Look, Margaret said, her voice sharp with finality. We don't have all day. Can you explain this in simple terms or not? Maya's eyes glistened. Her revolutionary process, the breakthrough that could reshape manufacturing, save dying industrial cities, and generate billions in sustainable profit, hung by a thread. Not because it wasn't brilliant, not because it wasn't profitable, but because the language barrier had become a wall too high to climb. In the corner, Keisha set down her water pitcher. Her jaw tightened as she watched a woman's life's work crumble under the weight of linguistic prejudice. The silence stretched like a held breath. Maya looked down at her notes, written in careful English, now smudged with perspiration from her nervous hands. And that's when everything changed. The coffee cup hit the saucer with a delicate clink that somehow cut through the tension like a blade. Every head in the room turned toward the sound, toward the young black woman who had just committed the unthinkable sin of interrupting a board meeting. Ma'am, you're not understanding her at all. Keisha's voice was steady, confident, nothing like the invisible servant who had been refilling water glasses moments before. She set down her silver tray with deliberate precision, her movements fluid and purposeful. The transformation was instant and startling, like watching a butterfly emerge from its chrysalis. Margaret's eyes widened in shock. Excuse me? I think you've forgotten your place. But Keisha had already turned away from her, toward Maya, and when she spoke again, the words that flowed from her lips were liquid silk in perfect Mandarin. Chen Lao Shi, Nin Di Xiang Mu Shi Geming Xingdi, Rang Wo Lai Bangzhu Nin Shang Tamen Shuoming. Maya's head snapped up, her dark eyes suddenly blazing with hope and recognition. The transformation in her face was miraculous, from defeated and frustrated to alive and energized in the space of a heartbeat. Ni hui shuo zongwen? Maya asked, her voice trembling with relief. Woshi Columbia Daxue de Guoji Shangwu Boshi, Keisha replied smoothly, then turned back to the stunned executives. Miss, Chen was trying to explain that her manufacturing process represents a 93% increase in efficiency, not a reduction in waste. The translation matters. The boardroom erupted into chaos. What the hell is going on here? Robert Hayes sputtered, his face reddening as he struggled to process what he was witnessing. David Morrison's mouth hung open like a broken door. How does a waitress speak Chinese? Margaret's voice cracked with indignation and something else, fear. The natural order of her world was tilting off its axis, but Maya was already speaking again, rapid-fire Mandarin flowing like a river that had finally broken through a dam. Her hands moved expressively as she described her process, her passion reigniting with each word, and Keisha translated flawlessly, her voice gaining strength and authority with each phrase. Miss Chen is explaining that her sustainable manufacturing technique doesn't just reduce environmental impact by 70%. It completely revolutionizes the production cycle. The process creates closed-loop systems where waste becomes input, where every byproduct serves a purpose. Maya nodded enthusiastically, jumping to her feet to point at the projection screen. She spoke rapidly in Mandarin, her earlier nervousness evaporating like morning mist. She's saying this isn't just about profit margins, Keisha continued, her translation carrying the weight of Maya's conviction. This is about resurrecting industrial communities that have been left for dead. Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. Cities that built America and were abandoned when it became more profitable to manufacture overseas. The executives sat in stunned silence, finally hearing what Maya had been desperately trying to tell them. But their shock wasn't just about the proposal. It was about the impossible reality unfolding before their eyes. Margaret found her voice first, sharp with authority. I don't know what kind of stunt this is, but you need to return to your duties immediately. Actually, Maya interrupted in clear English, her confidence restored by Keisha's presence. I will not continue this presentation without her. The power in the room shifted like tectonic plates. The woman they had dismissed, the servant they had ignored, had just become the most important person at the table. Keisha stood straighter, her shoulders squaring with quiet dignity. For the first time in the meeting, she looked directly at Margaret Sterling, and she smiled. The transformation in the room was electric. As Keisha's flawless translation began to unveil Maya's vision, the executives, who had been checking their watches and exchanging smirks, suddenly found themselves leaning forward, their cynicism melting away like ice in summer Sunday. Miss Chen's process begins with something she calls molecular reconstruction, Keisha explained, her voice carrying the weight of technical precision. Maya clicked to a new slide, speaking rapidly in Mandarin while gesturing at complex molecular diagrams. Instead of treating manufacturing waste as disposal problems, her system identifies the molecular structure of every byproduct and reconstitutes it into raw material for the next production cycle. Robert Hayes's pen had stopped its nervous tapping. His eyes were fixed on the screen, following the flowcharts that suddenly made perfect sense. You mean zero waste? Maya nodded enthusiastically, launching into another rapid explanation in Mandarin. Her hands moved like a conductor's, orchestrating invisible symphonies of industrial possibility. Better than zero waste, Keisha translated, her own excitement beginning to color her professional tone. Negative waste. The process actually consumes existing industrial waste from other manufacturers and transforms it into high-grade materials. A single facility could process the accumulated waste of an entire industrial district while producing premium goods. David Morrison's calculator appeared as if by magic, his fingers flying across the numbers. The man who had been mocking Maya's accent 10 minutes ago was now frantically computing profit margins. Maya switched slides again, revealing stunning before and after photographs of her pilot facility in Guangzhou. The transformation was breathtaking, from a polluted industrial wasteland to a gleaming, garden-integrated manufacturing complex that looked more like a technology campus than a factory. The environmental impact is revolutionary, Keisha continued as Maya's passionate Mandarin filled the air. Carbon footprint reduced by 73%, water usage down by 85%. And the air quality around her facilities has improved so dramatically that property values in surrounding residential areas have increased by 40%. Margaret's fingers had stopped drumming. Despite herself, despite her wounded pride, she was listening, really listening. Maya's next slide showed employment statistics that made Hayes whistle under his breath. Thousands of workers across multiple facilities, with wages 30% above industry standard and benefits that included continuing education, healthcare, and profit sharing. But here's the most remarkable part, Keisha said, her voice dropping to draw them in closer. Maya was speaking more softly now, her words carrying the weight of personal conviction. Miss Chen has specifically designed this system to revitalize post-industrial cities. Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, places where skilled workers exist but opportunities have vanished. The projection screen filled with architectural renderings of abandoned factories transformed into gleaming production facilities. Empty lots became research centers. Rust Belt wastelands bloomed with green technology and human possibility. The initial investment is substantial, Keisha translated as Maya brought up financial projections. But the return is exponential. Not just in profit, though. The profit projections show a 400% return within 5 years, but in community revitalization, environmental restoration, and technological advancement. Morrison was no longer just calculating. He was staring at the screen with something approaching awe. This isn't just a manufacturing process. This is economic resurrection. Maya smiled, understanding his English perfectly even if she couldn't always express herself fluently in return. She clicked to her final slide, a world map showing potential expansion sites across the American industrial heartland. 50,000 jobs in the first phase. Keisha translated Maya's closing statement. 200,000 within a decade. And not just any jobs, high-skill, high-wage positions in advanced manufacturing that could restore entire regional economies. The silence that followed wasn't dismissive or impatient. It was the profound quiet of minds recalibrating, of people realizing they had nearly walked away from something that could change the world. Margaret Sterling looked at the financial projections, then at Maya, then for the first time really looked at Keisha. And in that moment, she realized her biggest mistake wasn't nearly missing the deal. It was nearly missing the woman who had saved it. Margaret's voice cut through the reverent silence like a scalpel. I don't understand what's happening here. Her eyes darted between Maya and Keisha, trying to reassemble her shattered worldview. How exactly does our service staff happen to speak fluent Mandarin? Keisha's smile was patient, the kind reserved for children asking obvious questions. I have a PhD in international business from Columbia University. Mandarin was my primary research language. The words hit the room like a physical force. Robert Hayes's pen clattered to the table. David Morrison's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, resembling a fish gasping for air. A PhD? Margaret's voice cracked. From Columbia? Graduated summa cum laude. 2019. Keisha replied matter-of-factly, adjusting her server's apron with the same casual confidence another person might straighten a designer tie. My dissertation focused on sustainable manufacturing integration in post-industrial economies. Miss Chen's work was actually one of my primary case studies. Maya spoke rapidly in Mandarin, her eyes bright with recognition and excitement. Miss Chen remembers, Keisha translated with a genuine smile. I presented my research at the International Sustainable Manufacturing Conference in Beijing 3 years ago. She was the keynote speaker. She paused, switching to Mandarin to address Maya directly, then back to English. She's asking why I'm not working in international business. The question hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Because international business requires connections I don't have. Keisha said simply. And my mother needs medication that costs $4,000 a month. The brutal honesty of it silenced every corporate platitude in the room. I speak 6 languages, Keisha continued, her voice steady as granite. Mandarin, Spanish, French, German, Arabic, and English. I have publications in 3 international journals. And I've been turned down for 87 positions in the past 4 years. She straightened, meeting Margaret's stare directly. So, I work 3 jobs, waitressing at corporate events like this one, translating documents for immigration lawyers at night, and tutoring executives' children in languages their parents think might be useful for business networking. Morrison found his voice, barely above a whisper. 3 jobs? My mother has multiple sclerosis, Keisha explained, her professional facade never wavering. Progressive type. The medications that slow the progression aren't covered by basic insurance, and she can't work anymore. Someone has to pay for her care. Maya spoke again in Mandarin, her tone gentle and concerned. She's asking about my research, Keisha translated. Whether I've continued working on sustainable manufacturing integration. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Hard to conduct research when you're serving coffee to the people who should be funding it. The weight of wasted potential filled the room like smoke. Here was a woman who could revolutionize industries, who understood global manufacturing at a molecular level, who spoke the languages that connected continents invisible in their boardroom, refilling their water glasses. Listening to them dismiss brilliance they were too arrogant to recognize. The irony, Keisha continued, is that I know more about Miss Chen's process than anyone in America. I've studied her facilities, analyzed her environmental impact data, modeled her economic projections across 17 different regional scenarios. She gestured toward the presentation screen. I could implement this system in Detroit tomorrow if someone would give me the chance. Hayes cleared his throat uncomfortably. Why didn't you say something earlier? Keisha's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Say something? Mr. Hayes, 3 months ago I served coffee at your company's quarterly meeting. You looked right through me while discussing the need for diverse perspectives in international markets. You never saw me. None of you ever see us. The accusation landed like a physical blow, all the more devastating for being undeniably true. Maya stood, speaking rapidly in Mandarin, while looking directly at Keisha with something approaching reverence. Miss Chen is saying, Keisha translated, her voice softer now, that she's been looking for someone exactly like me for 2 years, someone who understands both the technical aspects of her process and the cultural dynamics of American industrial communities. She paused, emotion flickering across her features. She's asking if I would consider a different kind of job interview. The room held its breath. Margaret's world had tilted completely off its axis, and she was scrambling to find solid ground. Margaret Sterling's corporate instincts kicked in with the precision of a Swiss timepiece. She had built an empire by recognizing opportunity and seizing control before anyone else could blink. The woman she had dismissed as invisible help had just become the most valuable asset in the room, and Margaret would be damned if she'd let that slip through her manicured fingers. Well, Margaret said, her voice regaining its authoritative edge as she stood from her chair, this certainly changes things. She moved around the table with predatory grace, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Miss Williams, Keisha replied, her tone carefully neutral. Miss Williams. Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I think we can work something out here. Obviously, there's been a terrible oversight in our staffing arrangements. She gestured magnanimously, as if she were personally responsible for discovering hidden treasure. I'm prepared to offer you a position immediately. Senior Director of International Relations, 6-figure salary, full benefits. We can have contracts drawn up within the hour. The room buzzed with the electric tension of power reshuffling itself. Robert Hayes nodded approvingly. Margaret was doing what she did best, turning crisis into opportunity. David Morrison was already pulling out his phone, probably to call legal about employment contracts. But Maya Chen was watching this performance with the steady gaze of someone who had seen corporate theater before. She spoke quietly in Mandarin, her words carrying the weight of finality. Keisha's translation was equally quiet, but it cut through Margaret's corporate grandstanding like a blade through silk. Miss Chen says she's no longer interested in working with Sterling Industries. Margaret's smile faltered. I'm sorry, what? Maya stood, gathering her presentation materials with calm precision. She spoke again in Mandarin, her tone professional but unmistakably final. She says, Keisha continued, that any company that would overlook talent standing right in front of them for years is not a company she trusts with her life's work. Now wait just a minute, Margaret's voice sharpened, the veneer of magnanimity cracking. Let's not be hasty here, we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar partnership. Maya interrupted with a stream of rapid Mandarin, her dark eyes never leaving Margaret's face. Miss Chen is asking, Keisha translated, how she can trust a company's judgment on international markets when they can't recognize international expertise serving coffee in their own boardroom. She paused, allowing the weight of the words to settle. She says intelligence without wisdom is just expensive ignorance. The blood drained from Margaret's face. She could feel the deal her company's salvation slipping away like sand through her fingers. Surely we can discuss this reasonably. There's nothing to discuss, Maya said in heavily accented but perfectly clear English. I will not work with people who see only what they expect to see. Margaret's desperation began to show, hairline cracks in her corporate armor. Miss Williams, perhaps you could explain to Miss Chen that this is simply how business works. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer. I don't work for you, Keisha said quietly, but her words carried the force of an earthquake. I never have. I work for the catering company your assistant hired for this meeting. The distinction hit Margaret like a physical blow. In all her maneuvering, in all her corporate calculating, she had forgotten the most basic fact. Keisha didn't belong to her. Never had. Maya smiled, speaking directly to Keisha in Mandarin, her tone warm and respectful. Miss Chen is asking? Keisha translated, though her own smile was beginning to bloom. If I would be interested in working for someone who recognized my value before they needed it. Margaret watched in horror as the power dynamic completed its revolution. The woman she had tried to claim as her discovery was walking away with the deal, with the future of Sterling Industries. You can't be serious, Margaret said, her voice climbing toward panic. Miss Chen, I'm sure we can work something out. Miss Williams, think about what you're giving up. Maya gathered her laptop and smiled at Margaret with polite finality. She spoke one last time in Mandarin, her words carrying the weight of a verdict. Keisha's translation was delivered with quiet satisfaction. Miss Chen says she's not giving anything up. She's finally finding what she's been looking for. As Maya and Keisha moved toward the door, Margaret realized with crystalline clarity that she had just witnessed the complete inversion of power. The invisible had become indispensable. The dismissed had become decisive, and there wasn't a single thing she could do to stop it. The boardroom fell silent except for the click of Maya's heels and the soft whisper of Keisha's server uniform as they walked toward a future none of them had seen coming. The corridor outside the boardroom felt like a sanctuary after the suffocating tension of corporate warfare. Maya and Keisha walked in comfortable silence until they reached the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, the city sprawling below them like a circuit board of dreams and broken promises. Maya spoke first, her Mandarin flowing like gentle rain after a drought. "Keisha, I need to tell you something. Your research, I've read all of it." Keisha's eyes widened. "All of it? Your paper on cultural integration in manufacturing transitions? Brilliant. Your analysis of community resistance patterns during industrial modernization? It changed how I approach facility development." Maya's English was clearer now. Stress replaced by genuine excitement. "I have been looking for you for 2 years. Looking for me specifically?" Maya smiled, switching back to Mandarin, her words carrying the weight of confession. "After Beijing, after your presentation, I tried to find you. I contacted Columbia, but they said you had graduated and moved on. I searched LinkedIn, academic databases, professional networks. Nothing, because I'm not on professional networks," Keisha said quietly. "Can't afford the memberships. Can't afford the networking events. Can't afford to be visible in spaces where connections are made." The brutal honesty hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to cross. "I started hiring from Columbia," Maya continued in English, her accent soft with emotion. "Hoping someone would know you, would mention you. But no one had kept in touch. You had simply disappeared." Keisha laughed. But there was no humor in it. "I didn't disappear. I became invisible. There's a difference." Maya stepped closer to the window, her reflection merging with the city lights below. "In China, we have a saying, 'The pearl hidden in mud is still a pearl.' But here, in America, I think you bury your pearls so deep that even you forget they exist." They stood in silence, watching the traffic flow through Manhattan's arteries like blood through a living organism. Finally, Maya turned to face Keisha directly. "I want to offer you something," she said, switching to Mandarin for precision, then translating herself into English. "Director of International Relations for Chen Industries. Starting salary, $250,000 annually. Full health benefits including coverage for pre-existing conditions and a signing bonus that would cover your mother's medications for the next 5 years. Keisha's breath caught. The numbers weren't just life-changing, they were life-saving. But more than that, Maya continued, her voice gaining intensity. "I want to offer you the chance to implement everything you've researched. Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. You've studied them all. You understand the communities, the resistance patterns, the cultural dynamics. I need someone who can bridge the gap between Chinese manufacturing innovation and American industrial communities." "You're serious," Keisha whispered. "I've never been more serious about anything." Maya pulled out her phone, scrolling to a photo. "This is my facility in Guangzhou. 3,000 employees, zero waste production. But I'm building 5 new facilities in America. And I need someone who understands both sides of the equation." The photo showed a manufacturing complex that looked more like a university campus, glass and steel structures surrounded by gardens, workers in clean uniforms walking between buildings that seemed to breathe with natural light. "Your research on community integration isn't just academic theory to me," Maya said. "It's the roadmap for everything I want to build here. I need someone who can walk into a room of unemployed auto workers and explain why sustainable manufacturing isn't just about saving the planet, it's about saving their communities." Keisha's hands trembled slightly as she looked at the photo. "I've dreamed about this exact job for 6 years, and I've been searching for the exact person to fill it for 2. Maya's smile was radiant. "Sometimes the universe has a sense of timing we can't understand. My mother," Keisha started, "would have the best care available. I have facilities in New York, Detroit, and San Francisco. You could choose where to base yourself, and every location has partnerships with world-class medical centers. Maya paused, her voice softening. Keisha, I understand family obligation. In Chinese culture, caring for parents is not a burden, it's an honor. Your dedication to your mother tells me everything I need to know about your character. The offer hung in the air between them like a doorway to a completely different life. Behind them, the boardroom buzzed with Margaret Sterling's desperate attempts to salvage her empire. Ahead of them stretched possibility as vast as the city skyline. There's just one condition, Maya said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Keisha's heart skipped. What? You have to promise me you'll never serve coffee again, unless you want to, for the first time in years. Keisha Williams laughed with pure, unrestrained joy. Margaret Sterling burst through the boardroom doors like a woman possessed, her composure cracking with each desperate step. She had watched through the glass walls as Maya and Keisha spoke by the windows, seen the handshake, witnessed the exchange of business cards, and felt her empire crumbling in real time. Ladies, Margaret's voice echoed off the marble floors with forced cheerfulness that fooled no one. I think we've all gotten a bit carried away here. Maya and Keisha turned, their expressions neutral but alert. The transformation in both women was remarkable. Keisha stood taller, her server's uniform somehow looking less like a costume and more like temporary camouflage. Maya's nervousness had evaporated entirely, replaced by the quiet confidence of someone who had found exactly what they were looking for. Miss Chen, I'm sure we can work out our little misunderstanding, Margaret continued, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. After all, Sterling Industries has been instrumental in developing Miss Williams's potential. We discovered her linguistic abilities, recognized her value. Excuse me? Keisha's voice was dangerously quiet. Margaret ploughed forward, desperation making her reckless. Well, obviously we've been grooming you for advancement. This waitressing position was clearly a training ground, an opportunity for you to observe high-level business operations firsthand. She turned to Maya with theatrical magnanimity. We've been developing Miss Williams as part of our diversity and inclusion initiative, really quite progressive of us. The lies hung in the air like toxic smoke. Robert Hayes and David Morrison had followed Margaret into the corridor, and Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Even he could see the desperation in Margaret's performance. Margaret, Hayes said quietly. Maybe we should what? Margaret snapped, her mask slipping further. Let a billion-dollar deal walk out the door because our help got above herself? The words hit like a physical slap. Maya's eyes flashed with fury. Above herself? Oh, don't misunderstand me, Margaret backpedaled frantically. I simply mean that Miss Williams seems to have forgotten her position here. We've invested in her development, and she has obligations. What obligations? Keisha's voice could have frozen nitrogen. Margaret's desperation finally shattered her corporate facade entirely. Listen, I don't know what fantasy this woman has been selling you, but let's be realistic here. You're a waitress. A very bright waitress, I'll grant you, but a waitress nonetheless. You have student loans, don't you? Medical bills? You think you can just walk away from steady employment to chase some pipe dream? The cruelty was breathtaking in its casual brutality. Morrison actually stepped back, as if Margaret's words were physically dangerous. Margaret, what are you doing? But Margaret was past caring about appearances. What I'm doing is protecting this company from making a massive mistake. You think some girl with a PhD she clearly can't use is going to revolutionize international business? If she was any good, she wouldn't be working service jobs, would she? The silence that followed was arctic. Maya spoke, her English precise and cutting. Miss Sterling, I think you have revealed everything I need to know about Sterling Industries' character. Now look what you've done, Margaret snarled at Keisha, her prejudices flowing like poison from a broken dam. You've poisoned her against us with your sob story about your sick mother and your useless degree. This is exactly why. Why what? Keisha's voice was deadly calm. Margaret's filter had completely dissolved. Why companies have to be careful about charity cases. Give people like you an inch, and you take a mile. You think because you can translate a few words, you deserve to sit at the big table? Hayes grabbed Margaret's arm. That's enough, is it? Margaret shook him off, her voice rising with each word. We're supposed to pretend that someone who's been invisible for 4 years suddenly has something valuable to offer. She's been serving coffee in corporate boardrooms across the city, and not one company offered her a position. What does that tell you? It tells me, Maya said, her voice carrying the authority of someone worth $12 billion, that American corporations are even more blind than I thought. Margaret whirled on her. You don't understand American business culture. I understand perfectly, Maya interrupted, her accent sharpening with anger. I understand that you would rather lose a deal worth billions than admit you were wrong about someone you judged by her uniform instead of her mind. Morrison found his voice, barely above a whisper. Margaret! You need to stop talking. But Margaret was beyond reason, beyond damage control. Fine, take your deal and your magical translator and see how far you get without Sterling Industries' resources. But don't come crawling back when reality hits and you realize that good intentions don't build factories. Maya stepped forward, her presence suddenly filling the corridor with quiet power. Miss Sterling, I have built 43 factories across 4 continents. I have never needed your resources. I came here because your city needs what I can offer. But your city deserves better than leaders who cannot see the brilliance standing right in front of them. She turned to Keisha with a smile that could have powered the building. Shall we discuss your new office? As they walked away, Margaret's voice echoed behind them, shrill with desperation and rage.
You'll regret this! Both of you!
Hayes and Morrison stood frozen, watching their CEO's complete meltdown with the horrified fascination of people witnessing a train wreck. Jesus Christ, Margaret, Morrison whispered. What have you done? But Margaret Sterling was staring at the empty corridor where her company's future had just walked away, finally understanding that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Maya Chen stepped back into the boardroom like a force of nature returning to reshape the landscape. Behind her, Keisha Williams followed. But something fundamental had changed in the 15 minutes they'd been gone. The invisible woman had vanished completely, replaced by someone who moved with the quiet confidence of a person who had just remembered exactly who she was. Margaret looked up from her desperate huddle with Hayes and Morrison, hope flickering across her features like a dying flame. Miss Chen, I'm so glad you've reconsidered. I'm sure we can put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. There is no misunderstanding, Maya said, her voice carrying the weight of finality. She moved to the head of the conference table, the space Margaret had occupied like a throne just an hour ago. I came here to offer Sterling Industries a partnership. That offer no longer exists. The words hit the room like a physical force. Morrison's face went ashen. Hayes actually clutched his chest as if he were having a cardiac event. Instead, Maya continued, her eyes blazing with the fire of revolution, I am announcing a new venture. Chen, Williams Sustainable Manufacturing. Co-founders, myself and Dr. Keisha Williams. The title Dr. Keisha Williams rang through the boardroom like a bell tolling the end of an age. Margaret's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Co-founders? You can't be serious. She's a doctor of international business with expertise I have been searching for across 3 continents. Maya interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut steel. She's the architect of sustainable community integration models that will revolutionize how manufacturing facilities interact with local populations. And as of 10 minutes ago, she's my equal partner in what will become the largest sustainable manufacturing operation in North America. Keisha stepped forward, and in one fluid motion, untied her server's apron, and let it fall to the marble floor. The black fabric pooled at her feet like a discarded skin, and when she straightened, she was no longer invisible. She was incandescent. "Gentlemen," Keisha said, her voice carrying an authority that made the executives unconsciously lean forward. "Let me formally introduce myself. Dr. Keisha Williams, PhD International Business, Columbia University, co-founder and director of community integration, Chen Williams Sustainable Manufacturing." She moved around the table with deliberate grace, no longer the shadow refilling water glasses but a force commanding the room's attention. "For the past 4 years, I have served coffee to men like you in boardrooms like this across Manhattan. I have listened to you discuss diversity initiatives while looking through me. I have heard you complain about the lack of qualified candidates while I stood 3 feet away with qualifications you couldn't dream of achieving." Hayes tried to speak. "We didn't know. You didn't ask." Keisha cut him off, her words precise as surgical instruments. "Mr. Hayes, 3 months ago at your quarterly meeting, you spent 20 minutes explaining to your board why American companies struggle to compete in Chinese markets. I could have solved your problems in 5 minutes, but you never saw me as anything more than hired help." She turned to Morrison, who was shrinking into his leather chair. "Mr. Morrison, 6 weeks ago at the Metropole Hotel, you told potential investors that finding bilingual executives with manufacturing expertise was impossible. I was standing behind you, translating your conversation into 4 different languages in my head. Invisible." Margaret finally found her voice, shrill with desperation. "This is absurd. You can't just steal our deal." Maya's laugh was like silver bells with edges of steel. "Miss Sterling, there was never your deal to steal. There was my offer, which you rejected through your ignorance and prejudice." "We didn't reject anything." Margaret's composure completely shattered. "We were negotiating." "You were dismissing," Keisha said quietly, but her words carried the weight of absolute judgment. "You were so busy protecting your comfortable assumptions that you nearly threw away the future of American manufacturing." Maya clicked open her laptop with ceremonial precision. "I am withdrawing Chen Industries' proposal from Sterling Industries effective immediately. Our legal team will be in contact about the termination of negotiations." She turned the screen toward the executives, revealing architectural plans that took their breath away. Not factories, but campuses. Not industrial wastelands, but integrated communities where manufacturing and human dignity existed in perfect harmony. "Chen Williams Sustainable Manufacturing will be headquartered in Detroit," Maya announced. "We will employ 15,000 people in our first facility alone. Starting wages, $35 per hour. Full benefits, including continuing education, health care that covers families, and profit-sharing programs." Morrison's calculator fell from his nerveless fingers. "Our second facility will be in Cleveland, our third in Pittsburgh." Keisha continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We will resurrect the industrial heartland, not by exploiting communities, but by investing in them, by seeing the potential that others are too blind to recognize." Margaret was hyperventilating now, the reality of her company's death sentence finally penetrating her shock. "You can't do this. Sterling Industries has contracts, obligations." "Sterling Industries," Maya said with surgical precision, "has nothing we need, no expertise we lack, no resources we cannot acquire elsewhere, and after today's display, no credibility we would want to be associated with." She closed her laptop with the finality of a judge's gavel. "In 5 years, when Chen Williams Sustainable Manufacturing has revolutionized American industrial production, when we have restored economic dignity to communities written off by people like you, I want you to remember this moment. Remember the day you looked at genius and saw only a waitress. Remember the day you chose prejudice over profit, assumption over assessment." Keisha picked up her discarded apron from the floor. not to put it back on, but to hold it like evidence of a crime. This uniform represented 4 years of invisibility, 4 years of brilliance dismissed, potential ignored, talent wasted. She looked directly at Margaret. Your company's failure isn't economic. It's moral. You cannot see value when it doesn't match your expectations. The silence that followed was the sound of an empire crumbling. Maya and Keisha walked toward the door together, equals in every sense that mattered. Behind them, Margaret Sterling sat in her leather chair, finally understanding that she had just witnessed her own corporate obituary being written in real time. 6 months later, the Detroit skyline had acquired a new jewel. The Chen Williams Sustainable Manufacturing Campus rose from what had once been abandoned, lots like a phoenix built of glass and steel and impossible dreams. Where rust had reigned, innovation now flourished. Where hopelessness had taken root, 15,000 people went to work each morning, with dignity restored and futures rebuilt. Dr. Keisha Williams stood in her corner office on the 15th floor, watching the shift change through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city's resurrection. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of success earned rather than inherited, and when she moved, it was with the confidence of someone who had found her rightful place in the world. Her desk held 3 monitors displaying real-time data from facilities in Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. Production numbers that exceeded projections by 40%. Environmental impact statistics that had caught the attention of the United Nations. Employee satisfaction surveys that read like love letters to possibility. But the report that made her smile was buried in the 3rd monitor's corner, a brief mention in the Wall Street Journal's business section. Sterling Industries posts record quarterly losses as manufacturing contracts migrate to competitor. Margaret Sterling's empire wasn't crumbling dramatically. It was simply becoming irrelevant, one lost contract at a time. Companies that had once seen Sterling as their only option now had choices. Better choices. The market had spoken with the brutal efficiency of capitalism. Adaptability trumped arrogance, vision defeated prejudice, and recognizing talent was no longer optional, it was survival. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Dr. Williams? They're ready for you, in conference room C." Keisha turned to see Marcus, her assistant, a young man from southwest Detroit who had been delivering food to corporate offices until Maya's community outreach program identified his facility for languages and systems thinking. Now he managed schedules that coordinated across 4 time zones and spoke 3 languages fluently. "Thank you, Marcus. How's the engineering program going?" His grin could have powered half the building. "Professor says I might be ready for advanced coursework next semester. Still can't believe the company is paying for it." "Talent is talent," Keisha said, straightening her jacket. "Investment in people always pays the highest dividends." Conference room C buzzed with nervous energy when she entered. 23 individuals sat around a table that had been designed to make everyone feel equal. No head position, no power dynamics, just a circle of possibility. They were the latest cohort in the Chen Williams Talent Recognition Program. Janitors who spoke 4 languages. Security guards with engineering degrees. Home health aides with masters in business administration. People who had been invisible until someone bothered to see them. "Good morning," Keisha said, taking her place in the circle. "I want to start today with a simple question. How many of you have been told you're overqualified for the jobs you've been working?" Every hand went up. "How many of you have been told you're underqualified for the jobs you actually want?" The same hands rose again, accompanied by bitter laughter that held echoes of dreams deferred. 6 months ago, Keisha continued, I was serving coffee to executives who complained about the lack of qualified candidates while I stood 3 feet away with a PhD they needed. Today, I'm co-founder of a company that's revolutionizing manufacturing across 3 states. She paused, letting that reality settle. The only thing that changed was someone bothered to look. Maria, a former hotel housekeeper with a master's degree in environmental science, raised her hand. "Dr. Williams, how do we make them look? How do we become visible?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Sometimes, Keisha said gently, we can't make them look. Sometimes the system is so broken that visibility requires building new systems entirely. She gestured toward the windows, toward the campus that hummed with productive purpose. Maya and I didn't just start a company. We started a philosophy. Brilliance exists everywhere if you're willing to see it. She stood, moving to a whiteboard that held the company's core principles. At the top, in Maya's elegant handwriting, were words in both English and Mandarin. Hidden talents are the world's greatest waste. Every person in this room represents millions of others who are brilliant, capable, and overlooked, Keisha continued. Your job, our job, is to prove that assumptions about worth are often exactly wrong. To show that talent doesn't come with pedigree papers or specific zip codes or particular accents. James, a former retail worker with a degree in industrial design, spoke up. What about when they still don't listen? When they still don't see? Keisha's smile carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. Then you build something so undeniably excellent that blindness becomes expensive. Maya and I didn't just prove we were right, we made being wrong cost too much to sustain. She moved back to her place in the circle, but remained standing. In 3 months, 15 of you will be managing departments. In 6 months, 5 of you will be designing systems that didn't exist before today. In a year, some of you will be starting your own companies, taking this philosophy to industries we haven't even thought of yet. Her voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of absolute conviction, because brilliance multiplies when it's recognized. Talent grows when it's nurtured, and possibility becomes infinite when we stop limiting it by what we expect to see. The room fell silent, but it wasn't the silence of doubt. It was the silence of people recalibrating their understanding of what was possible. Through the conference room windows, Detroit stretched toward horizons that had once seemed impossible to reach. In boardrooms across the city, executives who had learned the expensive cost of not seeing were asking different questions, looking beyond surface assumptions, recognizing that the next revolution might be standing right in front of them. And in a corner office that commanded a view of it all, Dr. Keisha Williams smiled as she watched brilliance prepare to bloom in 23 different directions. Because the most powerful truth in any universe is elegantly simple. Genius was never rare. Vision was. The rest was just a matter of choosing to look,